Hello again, and welcome to another installment of Fantastic Fives, the show where we give you a list that is unquestionably 100% correct, and you tell us what we forgot and how wrong we are, even though we just said the list was 100% correct. This week we're looking at the top 5 worst Marvel comic events. Nobody's perfect, and just because the House of Ideas has been responsible for some of the greatest spectacles in comic history, doesn't mean that they haven't had their fair share of awful moments as well. This week, we point our all-seeing eye of judgment at the 5 worst offenders. Number 5, the Infinity Crusade. Marvel struck gold with 1991's The Infinity Gauntlet, and again with its sequel, 1992's The Infinity War. But unfortunately, the third time wasn't the charm with 1993's The Infinity Crusade. Maybe people were all infinitied out, or maybe they just couldn't take that this story's all-powerful MacGuffin was called the Cosmic Egg. Previously, cosmic hero Adam Warlock used the Infinity Gauntlet to purge himself of all emotions, which led to the creation of 2 new beings. The Magus, which represented Warlock's bad side, and the Goddess, representing the good side. As the cosmic equivalent of the angel and devil on your shoulders, you can guess that these two didn't really care for each other. However, if you predicted that his dark side would be the bad guy for this story, you would be wrong. For some reason, the Goddess is the one that the Marvel heroes had to band together to defeat. You know, it's pretty obvious why, because if she succeeded in her plan of ridding the universe of evil, there'd be a lot of superheroes out of work. Number 4, Fear itself. It's hard to call a comic written by Matt Fraction with art by Stuart Immonen the worst at anything, but 2011's Fear itself is a perfect example of too much of a good thing, or too much of a cool idea that slowly falls apart under the weight of itself. Odin's evil brother, Kull, escapes his ancient prison and causes 7 evil magic hammers similar to Thor's to fall to Earth. The heroes and villains who come across them are transformed into breakers of various nouns. Breaker of oceans, breaker of souls, you get the idea. The series had no shortage of cool moments, like Captain America's shield being broken, or a hammer-powered Hulk fighting Dracula and an army of vampires. The problem was it also had no shortage of everything else. Almost every Marvel book was thrown into chaos as other storylines were tossed aside to focus on Fear itself. By my calculations, there were 147 comics involved in Fear itself. 147. The plot was spread over so many books that by the time we got to the conclusion where Iron Man makes magic weapons for the Avengers, readers were too burnt out to get excited. Number 3, Heroes Reborn. Desperate times call for desperate measures. In 1996, Marvel was facing low sales on many of their most well-known characters' books and looming financial peril. In an idea so crazy it almost worked, their solution was to let 2 of their most popular former employees, Jim Lee and Rob Liefeld, take over creative control of Captain America, Iron Man, the Avengers, and the Fantastic Four. Lee's Wildstorm Studios would be responsible for the FF and Iron Man, while Liefeld's Extreme Studios would handle Cap and the Avengers, creating a new version of the Marvel Universe just for their takes on the characters. Things started off great, with high sales, invigorated interest in the classic characters, and some of the most Rob Liefeld-y art that's ever robbed a Liefeld. Unfortunately, despite promises of books shipping on time, the notoriously tardy Extreme Studios started experiencing delays which hurt sales. This prompted Marvel to put Lee and Wildstorm in charge of all of the books. After a year, the characters all came back to the regular Marvel Universe, and that was that. Ultimately, Heroes Reborn makes the list not for being awful, but for how disappointing it was that it didn't live up to its potential. Number 2, Ultimatum. Okay, imagine you're Marvel and you've made a new version of your universe that's free of all the complicated continuity of your old universe. Now you're free to tell fresh new stories with fresh new versions of your beloved characters. You can take classic stories fans know and give them a whole new spin. Sounds great, right? Now imagine you've been doing this new universe so long that it's got its own different but equally complicated continuity. Then add in the fact that your old universe is in the middle of a creative resurgence that's making the new universe unnecessary. What do you do? Well, if you're Marvel, you let Jeff Loeb and David Finch ruin as much of the new universe as possible and make one of the most hated comics of the last decade in the process. Dozens of well-known characters were killed. Deaths are not unusual in big events, but the fact that so many deaths were pointlessly unceremonious or unnecessarily gruesome left many fans disgusted. And number 1, the Clone Saga. There is possibly no more universally reviled epic than the Clone Saga. The quick version is that a bad guy in the 70s called the Jackal created a clone of Spider-Man. Everyone thought the clone had died, but he showed back up in the 90s calling himself the Scarlet Spider. Also, there were other clones named Kane and Spiderside. I'm not making this up. Despite initial financial success, things go so hilariously off the rails behind the scenes that the whole fiasco probably needs its own documentary. Peter Parker was a clone, and the clone was the real Peter and took over as Spider-Man. Everyone hated that, so they made Peter the real Peter again, and the poor clone got the Poochie treatment and was killed. To make matters worse, Norman Osborn was back from the dead and had been behind it all, somehow. Look, it would probably take like a month to try and explain it. Perhaps the craziest thing about the saga of the Clone Saga is that even though most people hated it at the time, Nostalgia Vision has made many look back on it fondly. So much so that in 2009, Marvel put out a miniseries that proclaimed it would retell the saga as it was originally intended to be told. Hey, it can't get any worse, right? That's it for this week. Check back next week when we put 5 more things in order that we're sure you're going to agree with. Thanks for watching this episode of Fantastic Fives. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Comics Alliance for more comic facts, and check out comicsalliance.com for more comic awesomeness.